Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be breaking down the veteran wide receivers in the NFL in terms of 2022 fantasy football, as well as looking a little bit deeper into their career for the next couple of years in terms of Dynasty fantasy football. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask, if you are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, to please make sure that you do hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help us out a ton. And if you would like to follow me on Twitter, please do so at Notorious FNTSY. So without further ado, let's get into my breakdown of veteran wide receivers in the NFL for 2022 fantasy football redraft, as well as talking about them for the next couple of years in terms of Dynasty. So the age cutoff of today's video for what a veteran wide receiver is will be 28 years old. So all the players in today's video will be over 28 years old. Now, some people might define a veteran wide receiver differently. Maybe a veteran wide receiver played in the NFL for 3 or 4 years. There's definitely different parameters you could set for what a veteran wide receiver is, but for today's video, I felt as though we had to set a parameter, and that parameter is going to be at least 28 years old or older. So let's get on into the veteran wide receivers. We'll begin with Davante Adams, wide receiver of the Las Vegas Raiders. 29 years old for Davante Adams. In 2021, in Green Bay, he played in 16 games, finishing as the wide receiver number 3.5 PPR and the wide receiver number 3.5 PPR points per game, having 169 targets, 10.6 per game, ranking second at wide receiver, 123 receptions, 7.7 per game, ranking second at wide receiver, 1,553 receiving yards, 97.1 per game, ranking third at wide receiver, and 11 total touchdowns, number 6 at the wide receiver position. So Davante Adams has had an excellent career thus far in Green Bay, but obviously a couple of weeks ago, he ended up getting traded to the Las Vegas Raiders in what seemed like something that came out of thin air. I don't think anyone expected Davante Adams to get traded, but magically, the Las Vegas Raiders sent over the Godfather offer, and they went ahead and got Davante Adams. And a lot of people are going to just completely demolish a lot of what Davante Adams has built in Green Bay because he's moving to the new team, and now he doesn't have Aaron Rodgers. And obviously, going from Aaron Rodgers to Derek Carr definitely isn't a step up. It definitely is not, right? Aaron Rodgers is skill-wise one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. He's won the MVP 2 years in a row now for a good reason, right? That's because he is a good quarterback, but that should not demean Davante Adams. Davante Adams is one of the best, if not the best, wide receiver in the NFL, and he is going to a team with a quarterback that he has chemistry with. In college football, when he was in college all those years ago, guess who his quarterback was? It was Derek Carr. So there should be no worries at all about this taking like maybe some baby steps, right? Where maybe the first couple of games, they don't have that chemistry. Day fucking one, Davante Adams is going to be just this huge target in that Las Vegas Raiders offense. Now, I understand completely that the difference between the Green Bay offense as a whole and the Las Vegas Raiders offense as a whole is very different. The Las Vegas Raiders actually have other wide receivers and other players on the team that deserve to get the ball thrown their way, that being Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller, obviously Davante Adams as well. Whereas in Green Bay, it was kind of just the Davante Adams show, right? Aaron Rodgers was just peppering this guy with targets. So when you're looking at 2022 and beyond for Davante Adams, I think ranking him outside of the top 5, maybe even outside of the top 4 in terms of redraft fantasy football is fucking ridiculous, because in Las Vegas, even though Hunter Renfrow, Darren Waller are going to be there, that might even actually help Davante Adams, because there's no way that you're going to be able to stop Davante Adams, Darren Waller, and Hunter Renfrow all at the exact same time, and that means that the best corner every single play isn't necessarily always going to be on Davante Adams. So again, to kind of sum up my thought process on Davante Adams, while I believe his targets may go down, right? Maybe he's not averaging 10.6 targets per game. Maybe that goes down to 8 or 9. I still believe that he is going to be able to get a similar receptions total. I still believe he could easily get over 1,500 receiving yards, and I still think he could be an 8+. He would scored 11 touchdowns last year, but maybe 8 or 10 touchdowns in 2022. That wouldn't surprise me at all. So, am I as excited about Davante Adams? No, I'm not as excited. but am I going to completely derail everything this motherfucker has built in the NFL, everything that he has shown me in the NFL because he got traded to the Raiders? Of course, I am not going to do that. So I'm still very excited about Davante Adams in 2022. Maybe he even does better in fantasy football than he did last year in Green Bay. The Las Vegas Raiders is far from a terrible landing spot. So I like Davante Adams a ton. I think he's still going to be very productive in the NFL in 2022. Same thing goes with the next couple of years. Obviously, he signed that big contract with the Raiders for a bunch of years. So he's going to be a Raider probably till he ends up retiring. So Davante Adams here in Las Vegas, I'm still very excited about him. I still think he is going to be playing as a phenomenal wide receiver in the NFL. The next wide receiver to discuss here is Stefon Diggs, wide receiver of the Buffalo Bills, 28 years old now. Earlier today, Stefon Diggs ended up getting his bag. He signed a very solid contract with the Buffalo Bills, getting that extension, which is all fine and dandy, basically making him also a Buffalo Bill for life. In 2021, he finished as the wide receiver number 7 in half PPR and the wide receiver 9 in half PPR points per game, tied with Deontay Johnson and Chris Godwin. While playing in 17 games on the season, he had 164 targets, 9.6 per game. You flip that around, you get 6.9. Very nice. I like. Number 5 at the wide receiver position, 103 receptions, 6.1 per game. Number 8 at wide receiver, he had 1,225 receiving yards, 72.1 per game, ranking 7th at wide receiver, and 10 total touchdowns. Number 7 at the wide receiver position. Now, last season, Stefon Diggs had a worse season statistically than he did the year prior in 2020. And realistically, when I was watching the games, I was thinking, man, what happened to Stefon Diggs? Because Stefon Diggs wasn't having these phenomenal performances. But even with that said, even with him not looking as good as he did in 2020, his first year with the Buffalo Bills, he was still amazing, right? Wide receiver number 7 in half PPR, wide receiver 9 in half PPR points per game, again, tied with Deontay Johnson and Chris Godwin. That is a very solid season. Now the Buffalo Bills, they kind of scrape away at this offense, right? Emmanuel Sanders is gone. Cole Beasley is gone. And is that necessarily going to mean that Stefon Diggs is now going to get 200 plus targets or something ridiculous? Probably not, right? But the team paid him the bag for a reason, because they are very confident that he is going to be the wide receiver 1 in this offense for the next couple of years, for the next 4 years, and they believe that with Josh Allen, Stefon Diggs can be fantastic. Josh Allen, in my opinion, is the best quarterback in the NFL, maybe besides Patrick Mahomes. You could definitely have a debate. There's a couple of wide receivers who are the best, so maybe or a bunch of quarterbacks that you can make the argument that, oh, this guy's the best quarterback. It's the same thing with the wide receiver position. You can make the argument that Davante Adams is the best wide receiver. You can make the argument that Stefon Diggs is, and there's a bunch of dudes on this list that you could probably make an argument about every single one of these guys, besides the last guy that I discussed, that they are the best wide receiver in the NFL. So Stefon Diggs is in a very solid situation, and he is a very solid deep threat on this team, and Josh Allen just lets that motherfucker fly, and I personally believe that on the Buffalo Bills, Stefon Diggs is still being underrated. People are still kind of pushing him down the rankings. Oh, he's 28 years old, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter how old the guy is, because at the end of the day, guys are going to be able to, now with modern medicine, play for much longer. Now, I'm not going to compare Stefon Diggs to Tom Brady because they play two completely different positions. They do two completely different things, and I highly doubt Stefon Diggs is going to play in the NFL till he's 44 years old. But what I'm getting to here is that at 28 years old, you're not necessarily falling out of your prime, correct? Right? Stefon Diggs is still in his prime, in my opinion, and he might even have a better season than he did in 2021, in 2022. So I am still very high on Stefon Diggs, and he is a wide receiver that I would not be surprised at all if he finished as the best wide receiver in fantasy football. Going forward, again, he is tied to a absolute rocket ship of a team. The Buffalo Bills are going to continue to get better year over year. They are one of the best teams in the NFL right now, and I think that should continue throughout the rest of Stefon Diggs's time with the team as a Buffalo Bill, so I am very confident in him and definitely like him this year as well as going forward. But before we can pivot into the next veteran wide receiver to discuss, I'd like to give you guys a quick word from our friends and our sponsor over on UnderDog Fantasy. They've been on your screen this whole time. I'm pointing at them right now. Our sponsor, UnderDog Fantasy, is known for their NFL best ball tournaments. However, UnderDog doesn't stop there. UnderDog has plenty of other contests for you to compete in, including live drive contests and pick'ems, in which you can make up to 20 times your entry fee. Use promo code Awesemo. Again, promo code Awesemo on your screen right now. AWESEMO SEMO to get a first match deposit bonus of up to $100. Please make sure that you guys do go ahead and get started on Underdog Fantasy today. So back on to the video. After Stefon Diggs, the next player to touch on here is Tyreek Hill, wide receiver now of the Miami Dolphins, 28 years old. Now there is going to be, I talked about this a little bit in the video yesterday about the young wide receivers. This is the veteran wide receiver video about how there is going to be a great debate all offseason long. People are going to have very strong opinions on this, in my opinion. I think some people believe that Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle together, they're not parasitic. They're going to be able to work together, a nice handshake together, and they're going to both be able to still excel in this offense. And then there's some people that are going to believe, oh, now Tyreek Hill's in Miami, that means Jalen Waddle is going to suck donkey ween for fantasy football, or the opposite, that, oh, now that Tyreek Hill went from the Chiefs to the Dolphins, that now Tyreek Hill is going to suck, right? There's going to be these arguments made all offseason, and now I am wearing a Dolphins hat. I'm wearing a Dolphins shirt, which is also kind of see-through because I got a green screen behind me. But while I'm a Dolphins fan, I put absolutely zero bias into these videos. If you guys have been watching me talk about fantasy football for a while, you would know that for years I have been fading Dolphins players, right? When the Dolphins have started to get better, then I'm like, oh, you know what? I understand why you might want to draft X or this player, right? But there's no bias into it. So I personally believe that Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle can both perform in this offense, and I personally believe that both of them can finish inside of the top 12. Now, is that of the highest percentile likelihood that both Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are eating on this team as top 12 wide receivers? Of course not. But would it surprise you if, again, Tyreek Hill, you can make the argument, he might be the best receiver in the NFL. So would you be surprised that the best wide receiver in the NFL in a quote-unquote worse situation is still amazing? Shouldn't surprise you at all, right? In 2021, he played in all 17 games just like Stefon Diggs, finishing as the wide receiver 6 in half PPR and the wide receiver number 7 in half PPR points per game, having 159 targets, 9.4 per game, ranking 7th at wide receiver, 111 receptions, 6.5 per game, ranking 3rd at wide receiver, 1,239 receiving yards, 72.9 per game, ranking 6th at wide receiver, and 9 total touchdowns, number 10 at wide receiver. Now, the biggest thing that is going to be swinging the pendulum as to why people are going to say, Nick, Tyreek Hill is going to absolutely be shit at Miami. It's because of Tua, right? They're going to say, going from Tua, or going from Patrick Mahomes is this Ferrari quarterback, right? And now Tyreek Hill goes from this Ferrari to a smart car in Tua, right? That's what people are going to say. And while Patrick Mahomes obviously better than Tua, I'm not here to tell you something crazy, right? That Tua is going to be better than Patrick Mahomes. Of course not. That's a crazy fucking argument to make. But what I will say is that a lot of people don't really get how Tyreek Hill gets a lot of his fantasy points. It's not necessarily that he is 60 yards deep down the field and Patrick Mahomes floats one to him, right? That's going to happen, obviously, because Pat Mahomes is a great arm, Tyreek Hill's fast, but a lot of Tyreek Hill's points comes from these dump-offs, these slants. Do you remember in the playoffs up against the Bills? When he scored that crazy long touchdown, it wasn't because he burnt the DB and he's wide open deep down the field and Mahomes just threw a bomb to him, right? That's not what happened. It was a slant. Tyreek Hill gets a lot of balls thrown to him behind the line of scrimmage. And if you think Tua can't throw a fucking slant or throw it behind the line of scrimmage, then you're not watching the games. You're just not watching the games if you think that. Now, again, I'm not here to give the metaphorical gluck to Tua Tagovailoa. That's not what this video is about. But what I'm saying is that Tyreek Hill can definitely perform with the skill sets that he has with Tua. He could perform with basically any quarterback that isn't fucking terrible in the NFL. And the coaching there, Mike McDaniel, is going to know how to use Tyreek Hill. He just will, right? He created Deebo Samuel. He made Deebo Samuel do Deebo Samuel things. Tyreek Hill could easily be the quote-unquote Deebo Samuel role in the offense. Now, again, saying that Tyreek Hill is the Deebo in this offense is stupid because Tyreek Hill has his own skill set, right? Like Tyreek Hill's Tyreek Hill, Deebo Samuel's Deebo Samuel. But with the speed that this man has, Tua's not a bad deep passer either, so I just don't really get the arguments against Tyreek Hill. Sure, he's 28. Maybe the speed will deteriorate. Maybe that's something that he does lose over time. But in Dynasty, I'm not really looking 6 years out, right? I'm not looking for 34-year-old Tyreek Hill. I'm talking about 28-year-old Tyreek Hill to like 30, 31-year-old Tyreek Hill, and I think he is going to be just fine in that time span. And if Tua sucks, you better believe this team isn't going to hold him in there, keep him in there, right? No, they're going to pull his ass and draft a new quarterback. They have 2 picks in the first round next year. So if you have a lot of anger towards Tua, you think Tua isn't the guy, then sure, maybe you fade him in redraft, but in Dynasty, you just hold on to him, right? Because another quarterback's going to be coming if Tua Tagovailoa is not able to perform. So I like Tyreek Hill a bunch this year. Again, still very confident in him. Next up, we move to Mike Evans, wide receiver of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 28 years old, 2021, plays in 16 games, finishes as the wide receiver, 8.5 PPR and 8.5 PPR points per game, having 113 targets, 7.1 per game, ranking 25th at wide receiver, 74 receptions, 4.6 per game, ranking 26th at wide receiver, 1,035 receiving yards, 64.7 per game, 21st at wide receiver, and 14 total touchdowns, number 2 at wide receiver. Now, every year, stooges like myself come on video, come on podcast, write something about fantasy football, about Mike Evans, and just talk about how he's all his value comes from the touchdowns. He's never going to be able to keep scoring this many touchdowns. And the issue with that statement, and that's something that I've literally talked about. I talked about how I didn't think that Mike Evans was going to be able to continue to play at this high level, scoring all these touchdowns, and he keeps fucking doing it every single year. He hits me with the Will Smith slap to the face every single fucking year. Because the touchdowns just keep coming. They just keep going every single year. He's scoring touchdowns. He was doing it with Jameis. And then a couple of months ago, I was like, oh man, without Tom Brady, Mike Evans might be fucked, right? But now Tom Brady's back. And Tom Brady, this might not be the retirement ceremony that we think it might be. Tom Brady might play another 2-3 years because this motherfucker is immortal. So Mike Evans is, at least for this year, you should be very confident in him. Going forward is where it gets dicey. So in terms of redraft, again, you got to be confident that Mike Evans could be a top 10 receiver. In terms of Dynasty, I'm definitely lower on him because of the fact that we don't know what's going to happen with Tom Brady. It's kind of similar to, we didn't know what was going to happen with Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. So very similar scenario in my book. Again, I still like Mike Evans a lot in redraft because I know Tom Brady's going to play this year. I just don't know how to project that going forward, and I don't know what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to do without Tom Brady. And Bruce Arians is gone now. Does that really matter? Probably not, right? Probably not. I mean, this is still the Tom Brady. I'm sure Tom Brady has huge reins over this offense, right? Tom Brady's going to call whatever fucking plays he wants. So I'm not too worried about Mike Evans again this year, but going forward, let me know down below in the comments if you made this far in the video, what you guys think about Mike Evans in Dynasty, because he still probably has 4 or 5 more years of putting up some pretty solid numbers in fantasy football, but my worry is, what's he going to look like without Tom Brady? Now, that might sound stupid because, again, he fucking performed with Jameis Winston. But if the quarterback was going to be like Blaine Gabbert or like some other schlub, then how much can you really like Mike Evans? That's kind of just my thought process on that. Next up, we pivot to DeAndre Hopkins, wide receiver of the Arizona Cardinals, 29 years old. Now, DeAndre Hopkins, we did see a lot of him last season, right? He played in 10 games, but down the stretch of the season, he was gone because he got hurt. Wide receiver, 43.5 PPR, 18.5 PPR points per game. Reasons why we talk a lot about finish on the season is because of wide receivers like DeAndre Hopkins who get hurt. But then you want to know kind of how they actually played during the season. You can't figure that out with just the finish on the season number. So 63 targets, 6.3 per game, number 64 at wide receiver, 42 receptions, 4.2 per game, 60th at wide receiver, 572 receiving yards, 57.2 per game, 52nd at wide receiver, and 8 total touchdowns, 13th at wide receiver. Now, DeAndre Hopkins' numbers last year were very heavily carried by the touchdown number. Kyler Murray, while there was a whole lot of talk for probably right when the playoffs ended, when Kyler Murray starts taking his pictures off of Instagram, he untags the Cardinals, and it's like, dude, does Kyler Murray want out of Arizona? What's happening? Yikes, like, what's going on? Like, Kyler hasn't really, like, well, Kyler's a good quarterback. I'm not going to slander him, right? Because when push comes to shove, he's one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL, but does he have this clutch gene? Is he going to be able to win in the playoffs? Is he going to be able to take a Cardinals team that's really fucking good on paper and take them and elevate them to the moon, to win a playoff game, to make the NFC Championship game, to win the NFC Championship game, to win a Super Bowl? Does he have that in him? And that's a question. That is a question that you can debate. But that question doesn't mean shit when you're talking about fantasy football, because in fantasy football, you're not playing in the playoffs. You don't need DeAndre Hopkins to go crazy in the playoffs, because you didn't go crazy in the fantasy playoffs, but not the NFL playoffs. You just need him to stay healthy and play for the team. And as long as he's able to stay healthy, there is no real reason to worry about that, because again, I'm not a doctor. I'm as much of a doctor as Johnny Sins. Ha ha ha, funny joke. But in reality, that's true. I'm not a doctor. But everything that I've read from actual doctors, I've seen from actual doctors, I've listened to from actual doctors, what they tell you is that DeAndre Hopkins isn't injury prone. He's not. So there's no real worries. Oh, he has an injury last year. Again, there's modern medicine today. Unless this motherfucker got his kneecap stolen from him or something, I'm going to believe in DeAndre Hopkins. And I think you should too as well. He is hooked to a good quarterback as long as he doesn't leave with Kyler Murray. So again, when these guys get up there in age, you're going to get them at discounts, right? You're going to get these guys at discounts because they're old. They're getting up there in age, and people in Dynasty are they're just erect to have a 22-year-old wide receiver on their team, when in reality, Davante Adams might outscore that guy. DeAndre Hopkins might outscore that guy, and DeAndre Hopkins is probably cheaper than that guy, right? DeAndre Hopkins goes later in drafts than Elijah Moore. Yet, we know what DeAndre Hopkins is, and what Elijah Moore could be is up in the air. So with DeAndre Hopkins, again, I've said I liked all these guys. It's true. They're veteran wide receivers. There's a reason to like them. They have a very good track record in the NFL. Since getting traded from Houston to Arizona, he's been great. He was great in Houston as well. He's one of those guys that it doesn't matter. I could go out there and play quarterback. DeAndre Hopkins is going to be chef's kiss, magnifique, have an excellent season. So with Hopkins, again, got to be lower on him in Dynasty, but if you can trade for these guys, because people are worried about age, then just do it. Just do it, especially if one of your league mates is dumb and is like, oh, DeAndre Hopkins he's injury prone. Then boom, you slide in there like you're playing Call of Duty, and you get his ass. So next up, we move to Brandin Cooks. But before we talk about Brandin Cooks, we already talked about UnderDog. Again, promo code Awesemo. First match deposit bonus up to $100. Make sure you hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment on today's video. I love talking to you guys in the comment section. So please leave a comment. I love talking to you guys down there. Genuinely, it's so fucking fun. I love talking to you guys. And follow me on Twitter if you ever need to talk. Talk to me on there as well. I love talking to you guys. So Brandin Cooks of the Houston Texans, 28 years old. Brandin Cooks. There's also some honorable mentions. Don't worry about it. So, Nick, why is Odell on? I'm pretty sure Odell's on the thumbnail. Nick, why is Odell on the thumbnail and he's not in the video? He is. Don't worry, he's an honorable mention. So Brandin Cooks, Texans. A lot of talk about him getting traded. A lot of talks about how the Texans don't want to trade him though. Like there's people. It seems like we should be able to get Hopkins or not Hopkins. We should be able to get Cooks for a second round pick. And I think a lot of teams should do that. But it doesn't seem like the Texans are budging. I mean, maybe in the next couple of days, Brandin Cooks gets traded, and then I sound like a fucking dumbass, right? Maybe that's possible, but that's not what seems like is going to be happening right now. 2021 stats, played in 16 games, wide receiver, 20.5 PPR, 23.5 PPR points per game, had 133 targets, 8.3 per game, 12th at wide receiver, 90 receptions, 5.6 per game, 13th at wide receiver, 1,037 receiving yards, 64.8 per game, 20th at wide receiver, and 6 total touchdowns, number 20 at wide receiver. So Brandin Cooks has been very sneakily one of the Nick, how many times can you say best wide receivers in the NFL? He's been sneakily a great wide receiver. He really has. I say sneaky because everyone knows Brandin Cooks for just getting injured, right? That's what you know him for. When in reality, when you talk about Brandin Cooks, you shouldn't be thinking injury. You should be thinking 6 out of 8 years in the NFL over 1,000 receiving yards. But no one brings that up. No one brings that up. His quarterback might be Davis Money Mills, the fucking guy who looks like a giraffe because he has such a long neck. So while he's getting up there in age, and while people just don't give him the correct credit, he is the credit that he deserves. He is cheap in leagues. He is a guy that you can buy on the low if you're talking about Dynasty. And even with Davis Money Mills as the quarterback, throw some fucking respect on Brandin Cooks' name. Throw some respect. 2 years in a row, over 1,000 yards. This guy gets like 6 tugs a season. Now, I don't expect him to put up some Robert Kraft numbers and get like 25 tugs a season. Maybe Robert Kraft probably averages a tug a day. But at the end of the day, Brandin Cooks is a guy that deserves much more respect, that has played well with a shit ton of teams, right? He's been on so many teams. He's had so many quarterbacks, and there's one constant, and that's him being really good. So again, getting up there in age, but still a guy that I really like. So, Nick, you said you liked all these wide receivers. I know. Why do you think I picked to talk about them? Because I like them. So on to the honorable mentions of the video, starting with Odell Beckham Jr., free agent, 29 years old, got hurt in the Super Bowl. Stuff I've read might point to the fact that he might be out for maybe half the season. Not great. I like Odell. I didn't used to. I really thought he was washed. I really did. I thought going from the Giants to the Browns, dude, he just lost all the pizzazz, lost all the swagger. He lost the whip, the nay-nay, all that shit he used to do. He used to reach back like 1-3, and then he just looked bad. He just did not look good in Cleveland. And I really thought that he was just washed up, that this guy just sucks. He lost it all. But in reality, it was kind of Baker's fault. You know, I like Baker Mayfield, but it kind of was his fault, right? Odell should have been performing really well like he did in LA. Where will Odell go now is the question. He's an honorable mention because I feel like it's hard to talk about him when we don't know what team he is going to be on. So he could sign somewhere where he's the number 2 on a really good team, and then boom, he's flying up the rankings. In Dynasty, you should still be comfortable buying him as a free agent. But in redraft, I'm not going to bang the drum for a guy who's not even on a team yet. We don't know where he's going to go. Next up, we got Adam Thielen, 31 years old in the Minnesota Vikings. Definitely has fallen out of love now that Justin Jefferson has been playing so well. But he's still a number 2 there. Kirk Cousins, despite getting a lot of shit, is still a fine quarterback. So Adam Thielen, definitely he's the oldest on this list, correct? He's 31. Yeah, he's the oldest on this list. So he might not have as long of a shelf life, as long of a career left in him, but he's still fine. Tyler Lockett of Seattle. Yikes. 29 years old. Lockett was a guy that I just haven't liked in fantasy. Very hit or miss with DK Metcalf. Like in the games where Metcalf is stomping, where he's playing amazing, Tyler Lockett is passed out in the corner sleeping. And then there's the games where Metcalf is taking a fucking nap and Lockett was going crazy. And that was with Russ. So now Russell Wilson's in Denver. Horsecock Drew Lock's the quarterback. Not much to like there. I mean, you could buy him on the low and hope Lock is better, hope they get someone new, maybe Baker. But to be honest with you, I'm kind of out on Lockett. I've always been out on Lockett, definitely even more out now without Russell Wilson. And then Keenan Allen of the Chargers, 29 years old. The number 1 clearly there in LA. Has been a wide receiver that most say is the best route runner in the NFL. Not going to argue with that. Very solid player. Obviously got a great quarterback in Justin Herbert. Mike Williams. The question is, if Mike Williams can finally get consistent, is that going to plummet fucking Keenan Allen's value? Maybe it will. Maybe it will. And that's something I'm a little bit worried about. So thank you guys all for watching today's video. If you did end up enjoying, make sure to hit that like button. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. Make sure to check out UnderDog Fantasy. Again, our sponsor, UnderDog Fantasy, is known for their NFL best ball tournaments. However, UnderDog doesn't stop there. UnderDog has plenty of other contests for you to compete in, including live draft contests and pick'ems, in which you can make up to 20 times your entry fee. Use promo code Awesemo. Promo code Awesemo to get a first-time deposit match bonus of up to $100 and get started on UnderDog Fantasy today. I love you guys all so much. I hope you have a great rest of your guys' day. And as always, guys, we'll be back tomorrow with another banger, and goodbye!